Hello, I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to talk about our sponsor, Anchor, hopefully at a louder volume this week. First of all, it's free and it has creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. I found it really easy to move the segments around in the editing process, and you can put the ads in wherever you want too, which is really helpful. And Anchor will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. This has been super helpful with the success of my first episode, having it on all of these platforms for you guys to listen to. And Anchor does that for you, which makes it super easy. And you can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership, which is perfect for people like me who are just starting a brand new podcast. So it's everything you need to make a podcast in one place. If you've been thinking about a podcast you want to start, this is me encouraging you to do it. All you got to do is download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm. That's ANCHOR.FM to get started.
Hello, and welcome back to Navigating Adulthood and IDD. Today we have a very special episode with a special guest, my fiance, Joshua Sinyard.
Hello.
So we're going to have Josh on today as kind of the average Joe or the average Josh who is going to bring his perspective to this topic while I also grill him with a quiz. So we're going to do a quiz about adults with IDD. So Josh, I'm going to ask you 5 questions.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Sure.
All right. The first question is, what does IDD stand for?
Intellectual disability. There's 2 D's though. Intellectual developmental disability.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, IDD stands for intellectual and developmental disabilities. And listeners, even though I said average Josh, at the same time, I am like in the background always talking about these things. So some of this information might be soaking into your brain and helping you come out with answers too. I don't know how, if we went up to a true average Joe, if they would know what IDD stood for.
I don't think I've heard the term outside of you.
Right. So, with that, can you name 3 diagnoses? Diagnosis? Please correct me.
Diagnosis.
I don't know what. Diagnosis. That would fall under IDD.
Downs. Okay.
Down syndrome.
Autism.
Mm-hmm. Autism spectrum disorder.
Is Asperger's still a thing?
Not technically with the DSM-5, so no.
And the DSM is...
Now you're quizzing me. Oh no, the Diagnostic something manual. And it's the 5th one. Let me look this up.
Okay. You can Google during the quiz.
Yeah, I can Google during the quiz.
That's cheating.
I can't Google how to say diagnosis. Diagnosis.
You just gotta. So you just gotta like the YouTube channel. So have you seen those YouTube channels?
The one where you pronounce words.
The one where they just like upload videos and every video is one word.
I don't know if it's embarrassing, but I've used those a lot actually.
I've used them too. It's like the greatest formula ever, because you will never run out of content, and you have to put 0 thought into your content.
Well, you have to say the word right, so I couldn't make the content.
So you go to another channel that has the same idea, and just listen to their recording, and then you make your own. Okay, so it's like 5 minutes per video. Right. They have like thousands of videos, and they will never run out of content, because like some of them do like names.
I'll need to look up.
Well, if this doesn't work out, future business idea.
Right. Okay, DSM stands for Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders.
That is not 3 words.
No. I was like not expecting more words. The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders is the 5th version of it. I'm very embarrassed as a music therapist to not know what it stands for, but I know what it is because it's just a book of of that word, different diagnoses. But fun fact, music therapists cannot diagnose individuals. That is not in our scope of practice. So if you were to have a child and were wondering if they had autism and were to bring them to a music therapist cannot do an assessment where they would be like, oh yes, your child has autism.
Okay.
We can work with children with autism and different populations, but that we don't fall under that with our scope of practice. Those are for different health professionals. So we're familiar with the DSM-5, but I guess it makes a little sense. I don't know what it stands for completely because it's more for me to know the different populations I work with versus like I need to diagnose these people.
Okay.
That's just me defending myself.
Who would diagnose, or what do you?
Pediatricians. Queenie. Just what cat sounds throughout the podcast now.
Well, yeah, that's
Okay.
that's the given.
All right, who can diagnose? A developmental pediatrician, a pediatric neurologist, a child and adolescent psychiatrist, so psychologist.
So those all sound like they were,
Kind of similar fields.
well, they're all specialized in minors or pediatrics. What is it called?
Pediatrics, yeah. Right.
Do you have
Well, that could lead into another question. All right. Below what age does disability typically originate for individuals with IDD?
So it's like originate, diagnose, or like
Right.
actually-
Diagnose, kind of you start seeing maybe symptoms or different things that would fall under the diagnosis.
Okay. Below which age? Or,
Yes.
I'd say 4.
Good guess. Actually, it's interesting enough, it's 18 for intellectual disability.
Oh, okay.
And then 22 for a developmental disability. So the disability needs to kind of develop before those ages to fall under the category. So like, for example, a traumatic brain injury, if you're like in your 20s and a traumatic brain injury occurs, that wouldn't be IDD because it's traumatic brain injury is kind of its own category,
Okay.
its own diagnosis of it would have its own treatment and specialists. Yeah, and so a lot of
I like how you called my guess good and I was off by 12 years.
well, one thing about IDD is a lot of times they're from things that are genetic or from like at birth. A lot of the times, like Down syndrome is a genetic disorder. Fragile X syndrome is another genetic disorder. And so like with autism, that one sometimes just kind of shows up more when they're a little older. So they just need to get the diagnosis before like the age 18 or 22 to count more as IDD. Although that could be problematic if you think about maybe somebody has autism and then they don't know till they're older, but kind of a whole other issue.
Okay. So that's why it's only pediatrics that diagnose it? Or?
Right.
Okay.
Adults won't typically be diagnosed with IDD.
So you have to be born with an IDD for it to be considered one? Or
I think just a lot of the time.
okay.
I'm trying to think what diagnosis would not be born with, but a lot of them are. Because again, otherwise it could fall like under traumatic brain injury.
And that's not considered.
You're not born with a traumatic brain injury.
Well, right. But that's not considered an IDD, or that is?
It could possibly be, maybe before the age 18. What's fun and making this quiz is there's different definitions for like what falls under IDD school systems and with like Social Security. They have totally different guidelines to like different definitions and like what counts to like get the to get a plan at school or to get the benefits from Social Security.
Okay. What question are we on?
This is gonna be 4.
Okay.
Question 4 is, what is ADA?
Is that the American with Disabilities Act?
It is. Yes, ADA stands for Americans with Disabilities Act. We just had its 30th anniversary, and we kind of talked about this off the podcast back in the 30th anniversary, which was in July. About it was huge for disability advocacy, but there's such like a long way to go, and you'll hear those stories from people with disabilities about how they still face like workplace discrimination because of some of the wording in ADA. So there's still just a lot of advocacy to go, but also it's important to acknowledge like that this did happen, and it's a good thing for disability advocacy, and just to kind of keep advocating for rights for people with disabilities. Ready for the last question?
No, but go ahead.
All right. What percentage of people with disabilities were employed in 2019?
So this is the percentage of everyone with a disability who is employed.
I believe so.
Okay.
You might need to look at the graph to confirm.
Okay. And this is adults with disabilities?
16 and older.
Okay. So working age, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll say 40%.
19.3.
19.3. What's this is a terribly rabbit hole question, but I don't want to derail us, but
What?
unemployment's like the most complicated topic ever. There's like 8 definitions.
Right.
Is that like the standard U6 or?
I don't know.
Your facial expression when I said U6 is also not translated across the podcast.
I'm gonna edit that out.
Okay. We'll just include a link to your
To my
picture
face.
of your reaction. There's like different definitions of what unemployed means,
Right.
and there's many. This comes up like every single time someone talks about the unemployment rate.
It's a good question.
Okay, we'll call it. Okay, it's probably I don't know.
Okay.
We've derailed.
I'll post this in the show notes, though. It is a population survey from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics for persons with a disability. That's my quiz!
Yay.
We both learned so much.
Yeah, who
I need to Google how to say diagnose.
had to answer more questions? Just go to one of the. Just do it on YouTube. There's a lot of suspense here.
Diagnoses.
Okay. Someone probably guessed that.
Diagnoses.
Diagnoses.
Okay.
Did I say that right? Diagnoses.
Well, yeah.
So it's diagnosis is singular and diagnoses plural.
Okay.
And I get tongue-tied.
Did you go to the YouTube channel?
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I could post that in the show notes.
Yeah. How many views does it have for the word diagnosis?
Diagnoses.
The word diagnoses has it has 5,582 views.
That's pretty good for a 2-second
It only has 6 likes.
audio clip.
The one comment on it is yes.
I would expect more discussion on the pronunciation of the plural form of a word.
With these videos, have you ever watched more than one? Because you like don't trust one of them.
No, I usually.
You go with the one.
That's a good point. There are
I'll go back and
multiple.
forth. I'll be like,
There's not a singular source of information for pronunciation, which is, I think, mostly a solved science.
So, in the last episode, I messed up a knock-knock joke. So now I don't know if it's more embarrassing I messed up a knock-knock joke or didn't know what DSM stands for.
Well, how bad was the knock knock?
But I was like,
You want to try it again? You want to redeem yourself?
do you have a knock-knock joke?
No, I don't have none. Do you want to try yours?
Well, I messed up like on the receiving end, so you would have to tell a knock-knock joke.
Oh.
I didn't say who. like
Like when you answered the door?
yeah.
What did you say?
I just repeated the word, so we had to start over.
Oh.
But I also didn't know what DSM on the spot stood for. Alright, so one of the topics I wanted to talk about today is age-appropriate music with adults with IDD and music therapy.
Okay.
So you've heard me talk about this before. It's one of my soapboxes, I feel. And really a reason why this podcast got started, because I had gone onto Google and searched for interventions for adults with IDD, and all you get is not a lot, or you can find a lot of resources for children with kind of the implicit idea that you can take it and make it work for adults, but no actual resources for adults with IDD specifically.
So by interventions, you mean songs or activities? Or
Activities is a pretty good word to switch it out with. A lot of music therapists will say interventions because when we're working on like specific non-musical goals, that's just kind of how we break up the session plan, is like, okay, we're doing this song now that's going to work on this goal, so it's this intervention. But I interchange it a lot with activities, especially if I'm doing work that's more like a music group versus music therapy. Then intervention's not quite the right word because we're not doing music therapy, so activity or song would be the best kind of replacement for it.
Okay.
Yeah, so a lot of times with adults, people will just be like, yeah, let's do Old MacDonald, and I'm like, no, there's so many songs and they're 30. Why are we about to do Old MacDonald?
This is a banger.
It is, I guess, but like you could do.
But I get the idea.
Right.
So is I mean, with adults with IDD, do they always want, I don't know what the term would be, adulty music, or?
I feel like that's where this topic can get complicated, talking about kind of the individual preferences and what they want. Really, for me, with the people I've worked with, it's been so mixed because every person has such a different music taste. So you'll have adults with IDD that like maybe what's popular on the radio, like Shawn Mendes, Ed Sheeran, Taylor Swift, etc. And then you'll have another adult that maybe likes Barney a lot, and then you'll have another adult that's into classic rock. And so it's just going to vary with every individual. So I think it really comes down to like respecting the individual and like their life experiences, but also just like respecting them as a person. Because if you were just to kind of blindly start music with them with Old MacDonald, not knowing if that's a preference or not, you're treating them like a child. And it comes with like kind of that disability advocacy of like people with disability getting looked down on because they're not cognitively like there or whatever. So they're like a child, but they're an adult. And so I think it really comes with respecting the individual. And then if you get to know them and they really do like Old MacDonald, I think individually you can use that and like balance it up. Like if it's coming from a place from respect, that's fine. I think group dynamics is where it gets really sticky, because you could have like that one person really likes Old MacDonald, but then the other people in the group do not care for Old MacDonald or want to be treated like a child. So then you have to find like that balance between individual preference and group preference when you're working with groups, which can be a really hard dynamic. But at the end of the day, it's like, just don't start the group with Old MacDonald. Get to know them.
Okay, so what do you start with then?
If I were starting with a new group of adults with IDD, one thing I would do is really, with music therapists will do like intake process, and in the intake process get as much information from caregivers, from people at the facility if it's like a day program, and be like, hey, what kind of music do they like? And so then a lot of times you can get that. And so far I have not gotten, oh, this group loves Old MacDonald. A lot of times it is like what's on the radio, Beatles, just, popular music that people like. So like that, you can find a way to start getting to know your group before you get to know them when you get that information. And then you can come in that first session with songs that they like. And then if I didn't get that information, I would do like a mix. I'd probably like have something that's kind of like rock, and then something that is pop and current. And for me, I would avoid children's music at all costs, just because I don't think it's appropriate. I think I really see it when I work with a group of adults with IDD. I see them as my peers, because a lot of times they are young adults too, so they're about my age, and for me to come in and be like, here's Twinkle Twinkle Little Star, like, what am I doing?
I guess when you go online and you search
Right.
or interventions for adults with IDD, what do you want to see?
Oh, great question. Just specific resources to work with that group. I guess specifically for music therapy. A lot of times people are looking for session plan ideas, looking for different interventions and activities, and I really cannot find much on the internet, even if you change the wording, just ideas to work with adults with IDD, or even what, like, this worked really well with a group that I had, and this is what we did. We used this Beatles song and it was awesome, you know? So that's what I just, there's so many music therapy resources online. There's a ton for children, so much for children of all kinds of different diagnoses, and there's a lot for different kind of mental health populations and older adults. You can find resources for all those. You can almost not find anything for adults with IDD, and it kind of reflects this cultural thing that happens where, like, after school, just adults with IDD lose so much support. They get so much in the school systems, and then they get to like 21 and there's nothing.
Well, this was a huge topic. You remember in high school we had the special ed or the special needs grants. That was always a huge emphasis, or a point of emphasis they always made, was how much the support, or at least the community aspect, drops off
Right.
after school. And
I think that is reflected even in working with adults with IDD, because you don't see those reports or the supports for professionals online either. They've dropped off for this population. And so it's just like, how can we as music therapists, and for all other professionals that I've talked with on this show, because they have also said in their fields it's like the same issue. There's like no resources. So how can we provide more resources and try to provide more accessible resources too? Because it's like that line of, as well, of like funding, where maybe there's something, but then if your employers can't afford that, then the funding issue becomes like a lack of resource too. So it's a whole issue. And so that's what I'd like to see more when you Google it. Just, so if there's a new professional and they're starting with the population and feeling really nervous about it, because maybe they've only worked with children with disabilities, or maybe even a whole other population, they could find things that have worked for other people and feel more confident starting with their adults with IDD. All right, so the last part of today's episode is our monthly music therapy session plan for adults with IDD.
Ooh.
So this was posted earlier this month. It is a beach-themed session plan. And so here it is. There's Hello, Hello by me. It's a hello song. And then drumming, using found instruments at home, and creating rhythms from different beach objects. Name that instrument with a tropical music theme. Songwriting, making a beach song as a group, and then you could use a game of hot potato to choose different melodies. And I put the song Surfin' USA as a song you could listen to. And then the goodbye song is Aloha Oi.
For someone who doesn't like summer, you've really leaned into this theme.
I love fall, so everybody get ready for the next session plans. But yes, I've really leaned into the themes. I've creatively, I don't even like the beach that much, if we're honest. Sand makes me very like, ugh. But I do miss like the waves right now with quarantine. I could use like just some waves next to me. But so I'm channeling that into my session plans. And then also there's a way you could do this all online too if you had an online group. And the breakdown and how I would implement this is on patreon.com/navigating adulthood and IDD. And for $5 a month, you can get the breakdown video of this plan and an early release of the podcast episodes ad-free. So I'd love for this to be a community where we could brainstorm ideas together and today I wanted to play part of the breakdown for Josh.
And the idea this month was to create rhythms using different beach objects. So you can use leis, beach balls, sandals, etc. I have a whole list here of just the start. You can really use your creativity in what you have at home too, and maybe even what your clients have at home if they have some stuff too. What you can do is kind of like hold up different things. So I have this inflatable flamingo. So flamingo has 3 syllables, so you can find different note values depending on what the group has worked on or what you introduced. So for that could be like 2/8 notes and a quarter note and some kind of combination, maybe a triplet if that's what the group is working on as well too, and just etc. Like beach ball, 2 quarter notes, or a set of 8th notes, or 2 8th notes. So either a TT or 2 tas.
So that's just like a sneak peek of the breakdown, which is almost 14 minutes of me breaking down each of those quick things I listed. Like, how do I implement this? How do you do this online, and etc. Is this a valuable thing for patrons?
Patrons or Patreons?
Patrons.
Okay, no, you just blended the 2 words. Is it
Patrons.
patrons?
Patrons?
Patrons.
Oh,
Oh, God.
I did blend the words.
Pull the
We need to
YouTube
pull
back
another
up.
YouTube pull up. But specifically,
Reminds me of today.
it hasn't caught on in any form, but I would love if my patrons were referred to as navigators. I think
By,
that
like, the general public, or
anybody.
Or is that like because you can name like tiers on Patreon.
Right. Although I now only
Oh.
have 1 tier, so I wonder if it still says that. But when I made it, it was like official navigator and captain navigator, and then I combined the tiers.
Captain Navigator.
Yeah.
Why not just Captain?
Captain navigator.
That's not.
Is that not a thing?
I don't think that's a thing.
Well, it's not anymore. So.
Yeah.
But hopefully, I would have to see what it says on the public page. If it's still navigator.
Okay. Official Navigator.
Yes, it says official navigator is what I want my patrons to be called.
As compared to the unofficial Navigators.
Right. You're officially a navigator.
Okay.
We're navigating this and we're creating resources. So, yes, it would be awesome if you could support the podcast that way. Other ways to support the podcast are sharing it with somebody you think would enjoy it, rating it on iTunes, and just continuing to listen is always awesome too.
And becoming a patron for the informative videos and other things such as
you get an ad-free version of the episode 1 week early, and then I also post some like relevant topics sometimes. So when ADA's anniversary was happening, I gathered a bunch of Instagram posts that had a lot of interesting perspectives and put that all in one post for my official navigators to read at their leisure. So sometimes I put relevant topics kind of either with things going on in the world and or like things that were discussed in episodes. So I would love if there's like comment features to make it like a community over time is kind of like my idea for it. But it's also a way just to support the podcast too. And then if you really are liking these session plans, I am hosting a workshop on September 3rd, session planning, music therapy session planning for adults with IDD. It'll be an hour and a half, and essentially it's kind of like my mega breakdown, because not only am I breaking down a new fall themed plan, kind of like I do in the Patreon videos, but then I'm also going to break down all the different kinds of interventions that I most commonly use with groups, and then how do we do that with groups, individual, online, different kind of abilities. And it will be on Zoom, so we can interact, ask questions, and hopefully, walk away with a lot of new ideas for your groups for adults with IDD, including at least 20 ideas for me and 8 of my session plans will be discussed. Woo. So, and that's coming up soon after this episode's posted, but that information will be in the show notes. If you're interested, it is $12 and will be on September 3rd. All right, I think that is all of the information for today. Thank you so much for coming on, Josh.
Yes.
I know it's different.
It's been a long drive. I'm looking forward to get back.
I'm going to make some chicken parmesan, and I hope everyone listening...
This is getting very bloggy.
getting bloggy.
I guess that's just...
Ooh, what's the podcast version of a vlog? A plog?
The Joe Rogan experience.
All right, well, I hope that everyone has a great day, and thanks for listening. This podcast is by Rhythmic Roots Music Services, LLC, with content and music produced by Bonnie Haupt. Thanks for listening.